get going now. If people are late, too bad. This is a great time to turn off your cell phone so it doesn't ring and destroy the mood. You too, Bonnie Jo, get it off.
I gotta turn off my GPS too, so nobody will know where I am.
Oh, good. It's a secret. It's a secret.
It's a secret to everybody.
So Bonnie Jo Campbell is here representing Comstock and the nation. She is a fabulous short story writer and novelist. She's going to talk to you today about writing. I'm really not quite sure what else, but I wanted to introduce her by showing you this wonderful video of her being chased by turkeys in her yard. That's how I like to think of her. Here we go.
Hunters, oh, they would never do that. They're wily. They stay away from you. I'm like, dude, come to my house. They attack me.
Well, my favorite part is where you say, develop other interests. So, without further ado, Bonnie Jo Campbell.
Well, it is great to be here, and as part of this, what is this you're doing today? Learning to write all day long? Is that what this is? I'm going to ascend the stairs just for the elevator. I can see you all. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about writing, and I asked Elizabeth, well, what do they want to know? And she's like, anything about writing. So what I'm going to do is start out talking about a certain aspect of writing, and I'm going to encourage you wildly to ask questions. I'm going to encourage you to wildly ask questions as I'm going. Because often that turns out to be the most interesting part of anybody's presentation about writing. So, well, all of you, just to practice, throw your hand up in the air so you can show me you can. Just throw your hand up in the air. Okay, so you in the middle with the, okay. It's kind of a smaller gesture. So, I just want to know, while we're talking, let's just have this be the most raucous possible time that we can have talking about writing. You know, do you know they teach you that there's different ways that people learn? Some people learn by reading, some people learn by listening in a class. And you know, when I was going to school, they didn't tell us that. We just felt stupid if we couldn't learn every single way. And but I actually learn by talking. And by writing, but it's an odd thing that when I'm engaged and I'm actually speaking up or shouting out or interrupting somebody, I actually learn more. And this has been a problem because traditional professors do not like to be interrupted. So I'm just going to give you, if any of you are like me, I'm going to give you the license to say whatever if I don't like what you say, I'm just going to ignore you. So I'm a writer. I got some books. I wanted to write all my life, and it took me a long time to be a good enough writer that I could actually make it my life's work. It took me many, many years, and probably from the time I was 15 I tried, and finally when I was 35 I was good enough to get published, so it took a while. And I feel like when I was trying to figure this out, there's a lot of things I didn't know about how this was supposed to go, how the writing thing was supposed to go. I thought you just had to be really good, and then you would naturally you'd just be good, and then people would tell you you're good, and then that would be that. And so I thought if you weren't good, you were just stuck. And the good thing is that's not true. That's not true. It turns out you can be a really shitty writer and you can get better. So that's the good news. You can get published as a shitty writer some places, but in general, you might have to rise just above shitty to get. On the other hand, if you start your own magazine, and you can call it shitty writing, you know, you can publish your own and other people's shitty writing. Actually, that's a good idea. So there's also, I want to talk about an aspect of writing. Writing is an act of faith. Writing with the hope of getting published or with the hope of anybody else in the world giving a darn about what we're writing is an act of faith. So what I've been thinking about lately is that we need to have a lot of faith when we write. And so I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about trust. Writing takes a lot of trust. You all need to learn to trust yourselves as writers. And this is the hardest thing to do, to trust yourself. Because the truth is, none of you right now are good enough. I'm not. Elizabeth might be good enough. I'll talk about Elizabeth and Langley later. But most of us are not good enough. But we still have to trust ourselves as writers, even knowing that we're not quite good enough. However, do not trust the world to appreciate you. Because it will not. And the world will not even appreciate your hard work. The hard work that you're putting into becoming a better writer. The world will not appreciate you, so do not quit your day job in order to make a living as a writer. But do trust that in the long run, if you keep at it, if you keep at writing, then if you keep at making yourself a better writer, then it will pay off. And you have to trust that that's going to happen, because it doesn't happen in the short run. It's like corporate America. Doesn't everything in corporate America happen for the next quarter? Like all the profits are for the next quarter. So if you have that kind of mindset, you have to go into business. But if you're willing to go for the long haul, writing could pay off. Okay. The number one thing that I had to learn as a writer was to trust my own brain. Okay? The writer's brain is different from other people's brains. Okay? Your brain contains 7,624,000 ideas and some loose change. Right now. Most of those things will slip away in the next couple hours, and they will be replaced by 7 million other things. But some of the things in your brain stick with you. Some of the ideas you have, some of the recurring thoughts you have, some of the bits of conversation that are in your brain won't go away. And I'm telling you, those are the ones you need to pay attention to. Those are the ones that stick with you. Those are the things that are in your brain that you need to grab onto and develop. So trust your brain to sort through the crap. Your brain will sort through, all the impressions you take on, everything you saw this morning on the way here, everything you ate, everything you thought about eating, every memory from your past. Anything that sticks with you, you can trust that that's important. I also want you all to trust your place in the world. There are stories everywhere, and a lot of us feel like we live kind of a boring life that doesn't have the kinds of stories that we want to write about. I used to think that I should write about Chicago and people in Chicago because they seem so much more interesting to me than the people in Kalamazoo, where I grew up, or Comstock, because who knows where Comstock is? Yeah, okay, so teen pregnancy, meth capital, you know, kind of place. I thought there were far more interesting places than Comstock Township. And so I was trying to write about them for many years. My writing finally made sense when I started writing about Comstock people. That's when it came together. And when I started writing about the kinds of people I knew, my writing made a lot more sense. And I don't want any of you to think of this as a limitation. It's not that you can't write about all kinds of people. All of us should be always adding to our repertoire. You know, we're extending our knowledge out into the world. But if you know well a group of people, you're going to be able to to write about them more intelligently than you're going to be able to write about a theoretical group of super cool people. And you know what actually the truth is? Nobody likes to read about super cool people. I mean, they do in like People magazine and in tabloids, but as far as writing stories, and maybe even poems, people like to read about ordinary people or screwy people or screwed up people, like the people you know. That's the kind of people like to read about. Also, trust your family to have screwed you up enough that you have what it takes to be a writer. By being clever enough to have grown up in a screwed up family, you all have exposed yourself to contradictions. You've exposed yourself to terrible difficulties and domestic struggles. You have overheard conversations that you wish you could forget. Yes. But don't, because they may come in handy in a story. Trust that your group of weirdos, whether it's your biological family or whether it's a family that you attached yourself to. When I was 11, I kind of got tired of my own family, so I went up the road and I moved in with these two families who lived in a tiny house together. So I figured there were so many people I might as well move in. And they were from Kentucky. And all they did all the time was go to stores and steal things. And like that was my idea of moving away and getting a new family. So I became a shoplifter basically. So. You should trust your writing friends. How many of you have writing friends? You all need writing friends. And if you can't trust your writing friends to help you, then dump them right now and get new writing friends. You need your writing friends to keep you writing. Okay, that's the first thing. You need them to encourage you just to take time out of what is a impossibly busy schedule and make time for writing. Your friends can encourage you to do that. And if you're really lucky, your friends can also kick your ass a little when you're not at your best and when you're not doing all you can do. Your friends, sometimes you need them to remind you that you can do a little bit more, you can write a little more clearly than that. And then you also need those friends to encourage you and to reward you when they see how hard you've worked on something. Sometimes you can share work with your mom, or with your family, or with friends, and what do they always say?
Oh, it's the best thing you've ever written.
I know they are. They're like, this is so great.
That's my favorite.
I know, actually, I'll confess, my mom is like my mom who loves me more than anything, like can't stand my writing, and she tells me so every time. So, I think maybe all of us need to have friends, need to have some people who we can hand something to and they'll always say they love it. We probably need somebody like that.
No.
But then we also need somebody to tell us how what we're doing is not as good as it could be. Jack Driscoll, he's a writer from near Traverse City, and apparently he's got his wife trained. His wife is his only reader, he claims. There's a lot of these curmudgeonly old guys who won't share their work with anybody. They always share it with the wife. So, and he said he trained her to read what he wrote, and then come in and say, this is wonderful. I love it. But, and then she says what she sees wrong with it. So. But I think there might even be a little period of time where they let it hang in the air. This is wonderful. I love this. And then, what's that?
But this can be changed to this and this.
Yeah, but this character is not believable. Did you have a question?
Well, actually, Ms. Howard, this is also important for them to be able to be the one to tell you, because as a comic writer, I hate letting anyone with my work. And once I look at it, I don't do it ever complete. I keep changing it, rewriting it, adding it, subtracting. And sometimes you need that friend, that writer friend, to sit down, read it, and say, okay, it's good enough, leave it alone.
I know, I did have somebody, I'm an endless, I actually one time worked on a story in a book club, and one of the women was like, she said, you guys probably know this phrase, the excellent is the enemy of the good. Is that right? Is that how that phrase goes? Excellence is the enemy of the good? Maybe perfection is the enemy of good. And somebody can Google that on their thing. If they haven't turned their phone off, you can Google that. And something is the enemy of, the excellent is the enemy of the good. And I actually think as writers, there's nothing wrong with going for excellence, because I figure I'm 40, how the hell, I'm 50. So I just turned 50, I started writing, really got serious about writing when I was 35. And I figure I've got 4 books, maybe I'm gonna have 6 more, maybe in my life. So for the situation of writing, I think there is a reason to go for perfection, because I'm gonna my writing will be judged on a very small number of works, relatively speaking.
So you're going to do secondary accounting. In other words, you'll publish manuscript number 1. You'll sit down and publish it, but he keeps mine in mind. Have you ever wrote Joe Blow number 2, the after story?
No, it's tempting. After a book is published, I would like to go through Once Upon a River was my novel that did the best. It's funny, it didn't win any prizes, but it actually was a bestseller, so you go figure. I actually would like to go through and edit it one more time. Just clean up that language one more time, but I'm gonna resist. I would like you all to make it a goal to trust the writing process. The process of writing in that first drafts, if you can get out the first draft, then you'll be able to work on it and make it better for the second draft. And that you can work on a second draft and make it better. Is there anybody who feels like that actually doesn't work for them? I'm just curious. Occasionally I've met people who claim their first draft is always, do you feel like it's always your best?
I skip it. I'll write it out, and see if I.
Oh, so you skip what's technically a first draft. Okay, so but who knows if you kept on.
So you're calling your final, you're calling your first.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you're kind of catching us up to technicality there. You can go on and write those.
But if you write and you keep that first draft, then it's pure, because after you do that, you start picking it apart, don't you?
And that is a good thing for most of us. Most of us, there are a few people in the world who can write, just go from the brain to the paper. And I think that historically, those were the only people who got to write. Because think of the processes we have now available to us. We have cheap paper. Think of the days when you have to write them on lambskins, and only rich people had lambskins, It was like, you're gonna do 10 drafts of paper, and you have to kill 37 lambs in order to copy out your manuscript. No, and in the old days, even people like Charles Dickens, he kind of wrote what he wrote, and that was that. Now we have this ability to just keep revising. I think Tolstoy, they say, he had it. Some people call him the first word processor, because he had some method of he'd have the whole 2,000 pages laid out, and he'd just make comments in the margin, and then he'd make his wife recopy it all. And then, so I guess she was the first word processor. Them working together was the first word processing system. But most of the time, for those of you who are interested in publishing, meaning you're interested in making the work the best it can be, trust the process of getting a draft out on paper. And then take a look at it and see how you can make it better. I feel like when I'm getting that first draft out, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know how that first draft's going to ever get out of my brain onto that paper, because it's not in my head ready to go. It's being created as I'm putting it down. But once I have a first draft down, and I feel like there's something valuable in it, then I use that as its own little lesson to get me to the second draft. It's sort of like the thing that I wrote, even though it came out of my brain, on the paper, it teaches me. It teaches me by showing me something interesting, and then I get to process that first draft and turn it into something else. And the drafts can be wildly different by the time we get to the end. But trust that process. You get something down on paper, you can make it better. The act of writing makes you smarter. The more more you work on something, the more you are an expert at it, and the smarter you are at working on it. And then there's this other aside that you guys know how reading and writing work together, right? Okay. You might not know, your teacher might not have told you this, but the way it works is that writing actually empties your brain. Like, after you've written, you're stupid. And you need to fill up, and you do that by reading. And so reading refuels you so that you can write more. So if you just write, I think you guys have met people who just write and don't read. It's not that good. And a lot of people are afraid, you know, oh, if I read too much, my writing will become polluted. And we say, good, polluted. It's like, it's like putting something in your water to make it taste good. You're polluting your water. So think of that. Think of reading as filling you up, and writing is the thing you do to keep that on.
Do you ever, when you write, do you ever revise as you're going on the page?
Well, that's the great luxury. I know, isn't it funny? We all have our own demons and battles in this writing business.
Not right, there's too many keys.
Well, no, it is true. You know, it's such a blessing that we have word processors, because they allow us to change, and they allow us to make change, you know, global changes. Think what Dostoevsky had to do if he wanted to change somebody's name. You know, I mean, it's huge. Not to mention he's Russian. They all have 6 names anyway. Everybody calls him a different name. But we can just change a name by doing a global search and change. How wonderful! But this is a risk for some of us if we just can't move forward. You know, so I think we all have our battles that we have to fight.
How do you write that specific video before you know, like, your final piece?
I wish I could know. I wish there was a number, because each time it varies so much. Like I'm telling you, the story that I spent 24 years on, you know, probably there were 50 very strong, 50 very different drafts of that. Even though at the very core of it, I can tell you what I was trying to write about a big working guy who's an alcoholic, as many of the big working guys I knew always were when I was growing up, and he's in love with a drug addict. And it's really love. It's not love. I mean, there are a lot of people who read a story about an alcoholic, and they're just like, well, he just needs to go into a program, you know, and she needs to go into a program. But life isn't like that. People don't go into programs. People just keep going. And so I really wanted to find a way to explore this in a way that the reader was willing to go with me. Because I'll tell you what, in most of those early drafts, people said, I don't want to hear about these people. I don't want anything to do with these people. I don't like people like this. And so my goal as a writer was to make regular people care about these people. So that was a challenge. It took a lot of drafts.
There's such thing as too many drafts?
I don't think so.
There.
Up.
See who offends. That's my back.
Do you like a lot of drafts? Do you write a lot of drafts?
In Kurdar's and listening to tell you that I keep bringing the same
Oh.
back for months on end.
Well, there might be too many drafts to give your teacher. That might be the thing. But the good thing is, like I said, each of us are going to have our own battles, you know, in our writing process. And hopefully we can educate our writing friends about how to help us with these writing battles.
How do you get over being overwhelmed by a piece?
Overwhelmed by the piece you're writing?
Yeah.
I think being overwhelmed by it is a good place to be. I think being obsessed by it, a piece you're working on, is a really good place to be. I think being completely absorbed in it would be ideal. Unfortunately, the world always usually gets in our way, and we can't be completely absorbed by it. But do you feel like looking at it like it's too much to do? Oh, okay, yeah.
Do you walk away from it?
Yeah, well, okay, that's another one. But feeling overwhelmed, like there's too much to do, I guess, you know, probably the solution to that is to look at it in its scenes, break it into its scenes. I can tell you all how to write a story. Just have a character in a situation, a character in a really tough situation. That's the beginning of your story. Let's say it has 5 scenes. Something happens in the first scene, and then something happens in the second scene that changes things, and then something happens in the third scene and things change again. Yeah, and then, well, just that, all you need to have is some scenes where something changes. In the center of every, there needs to be a purpose for every scene, and it can't be to introduce the characters. I know we always want to do that. Like this just is opening. We just get used to the characters. No, something has to change in every scene. It's hard at the beginning because nobody knows your characters and you have to jump in. But yeah, try taking it a piece at a time. Drop all your other classes. So that all you're doing is writing. That would be. Don't you think that would be nice?
I didn't wait classes now. So
You're what?
I didn't wait classes now.
Oh, okay, yeah. You're just overwhelmed.
Do you believe that all writers have their own process?
Oh, actually, before I answer that, I was going to say, you asked when to walk away from a story.
Like, come back to this, no.
Oh, okay, yeah. I just want to say, always do go back to it.
Yeah.
You know what? If you hate, and I will answer your question, but if you're working on something and you're hating it, you probably should move away from it. If you just find you can't, what I tend to do, I'm sort of an ADD type of writer. I wish I'd been diagnosed because I heard those drugs are really good. They give you, and they really help you concentrate. But none of you should take them. Apparently, there's a lot of abuse of them, so don't take them.
Oh, I think
So don't take them. But I kind of wish I could. But I'm not. I'm just gonna drink coffee. I'm gonna drink coffee to get more hyper because that's where it works too. But I like to work on a story and just work. I kind of feel like I work till I'm full of that story. And then I work on something else. So I like to have a story going and a poem, and I like to be working on something absurd novel, and I like to be working on an essay.
Have you ever took 2 years off a story and
Yes.
then it's pop back in your head
Yes.
and finish it?
Absolutely. So never throw anything away. Keep those stories. And again, my 24-year story was like that. I had a couple of years of not looking at it. So, and then I found I was able to go back to it, which was really great. But you asked if every writer has his or her own process, and I think so. But on the other hand, the process could be different for every single story. You know, the process for each story could turn out to be different. But probably you have things that you will always do for yourself. But don't worry about don't worry about your process. Whatever works to get you getting another sentence or another paragraph on the page. That's all you care about. Don't worry about your process. Okay, here's things not to worry about. Don't worry about how you're supposed to write. Don't worry about publishing. Don't worry about getting an agent. All those things are things people actually use to, they're like, I'm not writing the right way. Robert Owen Butler said that I have to write from my white hot center. and my center is actually like hot, warm and pink, you know. He does say that. He says, Robert Owen Butler said, the only way to write is to get in touch with your white hot center. It's just gross. And I don't want to be that. I don't need to be that in touch with my id or whatever. I know, what's that? Like rare meat or
What does that mean?
your white hot center.
Would that be relatable? That sounds creepy.
That would magic happen.
See, I'm dyslexic and I use that to an advantage because I obviously switch words around and switch letters around and everything. But I go back because I had to go back and fix the words that I mess up. And I'm also left-handed, so I don't actually see what I'm,
Oh, so it's kind of part of your revising process. Means
Yes,
yes.
I can go back and switch words. It might sound better, and actually that helps me. But then again, it takes more time for me to write. So
Yeah, never feel bad about that. Some of the slowest writers are the best writers. It really, there are some writers, on the web, I don't know if you guys see these crazy people that are like, 5,000 words a day, that's what I write. I'm like, well, what's the point if they're not good words? Seriously, there's all this trend toward writing a novel in a month.
Oh, Daniel Remo.
How about write a really good novel, however long it takes you, instead of, But it's a real obsession with the numbers of words that people get down. But don't ever be intimidated by that stuff. Jamie Gordon is a who won the National Book Award. She's a literary, a very stylistic literary writer from Kalamazoo. She's kind of hard writer for a lot of people to read. She's brilliant, and although she doesn't appreciate Elizabeth.
I don't appreciate her.
But she can't ever even put anything down unless it's already a good sentence. Like, I write word by word and idea by idea. I just get ideas down and I shape them later. But there are some people who kind of let if you're physically a slow writer, use that as an opportunity to let that stuff roll around in your head, and maybe you'll have less that you have to do on the page, if more has been going on inside the head. I've been thinking about Elizabeth's process, because I'm lucky enough to be in a poetry group with Elizabeth, and I've decided that Elizabeth actually thinks in poems. That's my theory about you, Elizabeth. That we can train, maybe, if we write for a long time, we can actually train ourselves to do that shaping in our heads. So my goal is to think in terms of novels. So that they appear fully formed in my head. The way that I'm theorizing that for Elizabeth, at least some poems, do you think that's true?
It is true, and I do a lot of walking and writing. I mean, I physically walk, and I do a lot of writing in my head before I ever put a pen to paper.
Yeah, and so it's okay if you're not the fastest writer. Literally just getting the most in.
Even when you do a poem, you do that? Like you have to think, like this own poems, like usually just flow. You have to think before you write a poem.
Well, each one is different. So sometimes but a lot of times I just need to feel my way through it or begin to hear some of the words that might be there.
Yeah, and I would say that for all of us, maybe trust that you can work on your pieces of writing even when you're not working on your pieces of writing. I've had some real kind of startling moments while driving. Have you guys had that before? Yeah. So that, because driving, and especially I think it's good to live in a boring landscape and dreary and wintry, because it gives you this kind of open space where there's not a lot to distract you. And are we on have we gone by the white-tailed deer place? No, that's toward Jackson, isn't it? What's it called? White-tail Museum. You guys should go in there sometime. That guy's wild. The guy who owns that place, he loves white-tailed deer, and you've seen all those, and he has those albino deer out there, which is kind of cool looking. He'll let you go feed them. He'll sell you for 50 cents snacks. And not only that, but he teaches tennis inside there. I go in there, I'm like, look around, why isn't there anybody at the museum? And he's in there giving a tennis lesson. It was so odd. Yeah. Math rules, but not as much as writing. How do they go together? Well, I would say that they're not completely different animals as I originally thought. I would say that, okay, do you guys know that once you get beyond a certain level of mathematics, once you get, say, beyond calculus, and maybe some of that elementary, matrix, algebra and stuff, what's that called?
Quantum mechanics.
That's a bit more physics. But once you get above a certain level of mathematics, most of what you're doing is proving things. In other words, you put your theorem up there, all graphs with so many vertices have so many edges or whatever, and then you are proving them with mathematical language, which looks a lot like English but has some other symbols in it. And I've actually come to see that in a mathematical theorem, you're trying to show something. And in a story, I am also trying to show something. It's something usually very different. In mathematics, I'm trying to show with absolute certainty that something is the case, and I use a very exacting language of mathematics, and I'm proving something beyond a shadow of a doubt. What I'm doing in a story is I'm showing a situation, and I'm showing characters resolving and learning, and I still am showing some. So it's not as different as I originally thought it was going to be. But on the other hand, I've used in mathematics, we're wrong a lot. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if the math people in here know this, but a lot of times we're just plain wrong. And it was a good lesson for me to just be wrong a lot and know that it's okay to be wrong, because I think sometimes in writing, we are also wrong. And we don't like to admit it. And it's harder to prove we're wrong. But having that built into me, knowing that I'm wrong, and knowing how to analyze something to figure out how to make it better and show what I really wanted it to show, has actually worked for me. So that analytical side has gone into my revising. So I revise in a very analytical way.
Les was going to ask.
Okay.
You turn around and you're saying that your math is a lot, which makes sense. Okay, so you're right. Is it more subjective or logical, or when you're trying to analyze the relationship and the characters, and then you go back and you rewrite it with the logical approach, then doesn't that take some of the emotional impact away from your writing?
I mean, you could imagine if somebody asked you, how would a mathematician write? I don't think you think of them writing the way I write, necessarily. For me, when I analyze, when I'm doing mathematics, I'm using the language of mathematics, and I'm showing something with certainty. When I'm writing characters and situations, I'm being absolutely attentive to scene and detail and how a character feels. So I've got a whole different, my tools are completely, or no, I'm using some of the same tools, but the actual objects I'm working on are so different that there's no danger. So there's some people could maybe overanalyze stories and maybe turn them into like lessons. Have you ever seen people write a story where it's almost like they're trying to write a lesson in the story, like drugs are bad. Like you could have a story with drugs are bad. And that's sometimes a temptation. I would say there's many larger dangers than the danger of being too logical in fiction. There are many greater dangers. For example, being boring. I should say this. Okay, you all live your lives day to day in the moral universe. You get up in the morning and try to do the right thing, and you eat some food, you feed some kids or feed some old people, and try to drive to work without hitting and killing anyone. You know, you are all moral entities. So the worst thing you could do in the real world would be, say, to kill somebody. I mean, that's a terrible thing to do in the moral world, where we live. You don't want to kill or torture anybody. However, you all know that in the writing world, it's perfectly okay to kill somebody. In fact, we love to kill people in our stories. So,
True.
it's a very different world you're in. And I'll tell you what the biggest crime in the world, in the writing world is. Biggest crime is being boring. That's like killing someone in the moral universe. It's like if your story gets boring, you have committed a terrible crime, and you will be punished in that nobody will read your story.
So you use the vocabulary to expand.
You ask a lot of complicated questions.
I want you to make sure you read something up here.
Oh, okay. I was going to say the last thing I want you all to trust in is your obsessions. And if you have obsessions, count yourself lucky. And if you do not have obsessions, then you should start developing them. Maybe your new friends, after you dump your old writing friends and get new ones, maybe your new friends can help you develop new obsessions.
You don't need obsessions like this. It's not good.
Do you have some unhealthy obsessions?
That's not good.
Oh, I don't know. You may be able to work with those obsessions and bring something to the page. So I'm going to tell you all about a little obsession I had, and it's going to lead to my reading a little something. A little obsession I had with a local tow truck driver. Okay? My local tow truck driver, Don York, always was one of these guys carrying a big wad of cash around, right? You know the type. Didn't believe in banks, carried a big wad of cash. Everybody knew he had it. Don York's about that tall, skinny. So we kind of knew eventually. He lived alone. And so eventually some guys beat him up real bad. And he was in the hospital. My sister came home and said, you know, Don York's pretty much dead. And then weeks passed, and suddenly, not only was he not dead, But he had checked himself out of the hospital, refused all treatment, and just went and lived with his son or something. This is odd. You know, how can you refuse treatment? And then, okay, this is how bad he was beaten. Literally gray stuff was coming out of his head. So, and then not only, nobody thought to take away his driving license. So he's a tow truck driver. So he started driving. He started towing cars again. He could hardly talk. And there's a lot of words he still can't say to this day. Like he can't say 10 for some reason. If you owe him $10, he'll say, give me 2 5s. So I just became obsessed with this guy. And he runs this little junkyard. And I just became obsessed with him. Like, how did he live? Well, who were these people who beat him up? Why did they beat him up? Because he's like a pal to everybody. And yet these guys beat him up. So I just became obsessed with his story. So I hung out with the guy, I hung out with the junkyard, I watched everything they did, I talked to the guy. What's that?
Yeah, that's essential.
So, but I did everything I could to get to understand the situation. And so from that, I ended up writing an essay. And I wanted to tell, in this essay, in a creative way, I wanted to tell the truth. And then, after telling the truth, I found that I wanted to write a story. Weirdly enough, I became obsessed. Okay, they caught the guys. Well, one of them. I happen to know more. Like all I gotta do is like poke around, and you know more than the cops know. You guys know this, right? Because cops don't really work very hard to find out the truth. I shouldn't say that. There's probably cops working very hard to find the truth out. But I keep finding out more things about this case the more I poke around. But so they put the guy in jail for there's a trial, and I watched the video of the trial. So it was a very long video, I don't know, 20 or 30 hours or something. And I became obsessed with the defendant. Because not only was he was guilty as hell, but he did a couple of kind things on the stand. He didn't turn in a couple of people that he could have turned in. It was just an interesting, odd thing. And he was like this big oaf, like this stupid, oafy guy. And so I ended up writing a story from his point of view. And then after that, I found I still was thinking about it, and I wrote a couple of poems about it. So I can read a little bit from the essay. Are we here till 20 after?
We're here until 12:30.
Until 12:30. Okay. Okay. So here's from the real life essay called "Crimes Against a Record Driver." He always called himself a record driver, not a tow truck driver. On a Saturday night, October 19th, 2002, Henry Lanning and Chad Van Dusen, each 6 foot tall and over 230 pounds, pulled into Don York's driveway in a borrowed GMC Jimmy. They had an iron pipe and a roll of duct tape and gloves. Lanning got out and approached the house while Van Dusen stayed in the vehicle. York had heard the neighbor's dog barking, so he opened the upstairs window and turned on the outside light. Lanning shouted out that he needed to jump for his vehicle, parked down the road. York, who is a trim man, 5'8", with shoulder-length white hair, did not know Lanning, but when he saw the guy was wearing brand new gloves, he felt something was wrong. He yelled down, "I'm in for the night." He told Lanning to go jump the car himself with the vehicle he was driving. His house alarm system was already set, but after he closed the window, he loaded his shotgun anyway with 4 cartridges. That night and the next few nights, he slept with the shotgun in his bedroom. Chad Van Dusen was Don York's ex-wife's nephew, and Van Dusen had met Henry Lanning a few days earlier at the home of a mutual friend. And both men were absconders from parole. In Van Dusen's words, they both needed to hit a lick. And that was a phrase I learned, hit a lick. So do you guys know that phrase?
Yeah.
Kind of like get a little bonus, get a little lucky break.
You get a lick, you rob somebody.
Yeah, which was to say they needed to make some money fast. However, the men gave up on York that night and went home, according to Van Dusen, who later pled guilty to conspiracy to commit armed robbery. According to the prosecution and key witnesses, Lanning returned alone 3 nights later with some rope and a busted-off tree branch, the length and thickness of a baseball bat, and he hid in the trees outside York's house and waited. Don York was known to be a man who didn't like banks. Anyone who knew him knew he carried in his pockets rolls of cash, from which he could peel off as many 20s, 50s, 100s as he needed. And he was rumored to keep his life savings in his house. Don York had always driven a tow truck, and for 25 years he's run his small junkyard just beyond the border of Comstock Township, where he grew up and almost graduated high school in 1967. On the following Tuesday night, October 22nd, at about 8 o'clock, York pulled in the driveway, shone his bright lights on his front door so he could see to unlock it. He turned off his alarm, then went back out to the wrecker to get the pizza picked up for dinner. You see his mistake. The next thing he remembers is waking up in the hospital 3 weeks later. And I do in this essay, which finally is going to be published in City Review, so that's nice. But I put all the grisly details in because, you know, this was a really horrible crime. And I was just interested in getting exactly what happened, how things came out. Okay. So I'm going to read to you a little bit of the, how many of you write things from real life? Okay. Because I think this is a good way to go. I don't usually do it as precisely as I'm doing it here, but I'm going to read to you the fictional piece that I wrote, and you're going to see a whole bunch of elements, the same elements that I just read to you. So I renamed him King Cole. Isn't that funny? Nobody ever called me on it. Nobody ever said to me, that's crazy. King Cole. I thought, why wouldn't there be a record driver named King Cole? So this is a story called King Cole's American Salvage. And I'll tell you that the slowest story I wrote was the one that took me 24 years. This was actually the fastest story I ever wrote. I wrote it in 5 months. So that was the quickest I've ever written. King Cole's American Salvage. On a windy evening in February, William Slocum Jr., 11 months out of prison, pulled into King Cole's driveway in a Jeep he'd stolen from an apartment complex near his girlfriend's house. He cut through the Jeep's canvas top with a utility knife, popped the ignition with a screwdriver, and hot-wired the engine, a trick William Slocum Sr. had taught him not long before passing out drunk on the railroad tracks. Slocum's car had broken down 2 days ago, and King Cole of King Cole's American Salvage had given him $75 for it, minimum scrap price. That old Mitsubishi Montero hadn't been registered or insured, so if he left it broken down in the road, the city of Kalamazoo would have impounded it. But still, Slocum felt Cole had ripped him off, had not given him what the car was worth. Slocum and his girlfriend Wanda were now without any car since hers had been repossessed 2 months ago. She also hadn't managed to pay her mortgage or get enough methamphetamine to keep herself going since she lost her job. Slocum hadn't been getting any work either, so things were tight. He tried to make love with Wanda last night, but without the meth, it wasn't working. And he knew tonight he needed to hit a lick. If he didn't, Wanda was bound to lose faith in him. Slocum got out of the Jeep, carrying with him a length of galvanized pipe he'd swiped from Parker's Auto Repair, where he bought meth sometimes, and where he met Johnny Cole, King Cole's nephew. They'd known each other less than 2 weeks, but right off, Slocum knew he was 5 years younger than Slocum and still pocked with acne. Johnny was generous with the homegrown and seemed like the kind of person you could trust, a rare quality. Slocum had liked the way the kid asked his advice, had seemed to look up to him. Slocum knocked hard on King Cole's ornate wood and wrought iron front door, and in about a minute, King swung open an upstairs casement window and turned on the security light, which lit up the crusted snow. Slocum could see by the tire tracks that the tow truck was the only vehicle that had been there recently. According to Johnny, the man's wife had died years ago, and according to the sticker on the window, Cole had an alarm system. "What do you want?" King said through the screen. The small man stood with one hand on his pot belly. His long beard and shoulder-length hair were black. Johnny had told him the old man dyed it because he thought it made him attractive to the ladies. "I need a jump start, or maybe a tow," Slocum said. I don't work at night. Call somebody else. Cole started to close the window. I'm a friend of Johnny's, Slocum said quickly, backed up so Cole could see it better. Your nephew Johnny. You scrapped my old car the other day, that blue Mitsubishi. Cole opened the window again. That Jap crap isn't worth a shit. That's what you said. Slocum had stayed up late smoking and drinking beer with Johnny a few nights ago. And when Johnny was stoned, he told Slocum what a cheap bastard King Cole was. How Johnny worked his ass off for his uncle. But the man wouldn't lend Johnny enough money to buy some old diesel truck he wanted. King Cole didn't like banks, Johnny had said. He carried a shitload of money on him, thousands of dollars in hidden pockets in his jacket. I should go out to his house late some night and negotiate my own loan, Johnny had said, and they both laughed. So did you see the things that I took from the real life? Some of the phrasing, some of the phrases came from there, and the general situation of guys going up, and here's King Cole, or here's was Don York in his upstairs window looking down, and then it was kind of the same setup for King Cole, only it was from the point of view of the bad guy. So and I would say that in fiction, you can tell a story you can't tell in an essay. For example, I couldn't tell that story in real life from the point of view of the bad guy, because I might interview him, but I don't know if he's going to tell me the truth. You know. And the weird thing is, he just died in prison. I just checked him on that. The Michigan corrections. You guys know you can look up criminals, right? Yeah. So then I wrote a couple poems about it, because what I found is that there were images that stuck with me from my experience of hanging out in the junkyard. And one thing that I was really impressed by is the way that a man tears apart a car to get off all the valuable parts. Here in this mechanized day and age, when you think about everything's mechanized, and yet there is a human being with just this old delicate flesh there tearing apart automobiles, like crowbars and stuff, and it struck me. So I'm going to read to you this poem I wrote, and it was about Don York's assistant, John Weaver, who also just died. They're dropping like flies in Comstock. This is called Winter Song in the Salvage Yard. The snow-covered Lincoln shivers beneath your propane torch. Imagine this junkyard in flames, oiled hot enough to melt ice, and tires hot enough to turn platinum to gold. Only one naked lady in the place, a cartoon from 1964. Whiskey and brake fluid thaw frozen blood, lubricate the hard pumping heart. A skinny kid offers you a tenner for a Holly carburetor. Your voice carries over the noise of the tire machine. Son, you ain't getting it for less than 20. Oh, save me from grease and steel, you sing as you hoist the Lincoln aloft, reveal its belly and climb on under, singing, Lord, give me this catalytic converter. Don't let this beast fall and crush me. Let me yank this bastard starter cold as the pump handle, singing, don't let me die before I'm old, as you knock off those icy tires with a sledgehammer swung like a sword. Oh Lord, break free these stainless steel brake lines, and don't let a beautiful woman walk through that gate to shake me up. Don't send me an angel. Don't carry me away. It just seemed so amazing. He was just under there tearing apart his car. And then he died of, I think, lung cancer. He smoked like a chimney. None of you smoke. Smoking's bad. Stop it. Okay, I'm going to read one more poem that kind of tells the Don York story. It's a shorter poem. And this is not something we always want to do in poems, to tell a story. But I like to, because I'm a story writer. So sometimes my poems are more like stories. This is called Lake and Olmsted. Kind of the main crossing in my neighborhood. Lake and Olmsted. Everybody rises up again in this place like a bunch of stone-hungry phoenixes with acne and ringworm and knuckle tattoos. The rapist gets out of jail with a boner for the liquor store clerk. Nobody pays child support, and abortions don't take. fetuses cling to uteri like barnacles to boat bottoms. The boys who cook meth bash open the head of our tow truck driver, leave him in the snow to die, and he lies there for a day, moaning at first, and then a long time silent. But he rises up again to drive and tow the uninsured cars of coke whores and scrap metal thieves. We build a shrine to him in the bloody snow, where his brains leaked out, and only a few of us rob him now. So we have about 1 minute left if somebody wants to ask one more question. See, you guys appreciate that poem. I've read that poem some places, and nobody laughs.
We don't want to be there where you live.
Yeah, I don't want to go to
No.
Wait, oh, yeah, okay. You first.
What's your advice to people who are storytellers who have a hard time writing their stories down?
Speak them into a tape recorder. Speak them into a tape recorder and have your wife transcribe it. Oh, you don't have a wife, okay. Just do your best. Get something down. Get anything down. That's what you need to do. When you're given an assignment or when you know you want to write a story, get down what you can. You may not have a whole thing to start with, but you start with something and it'll build and build and build. Like the snowman